Picture a cowboy rolling a joint by the campfire after a long cattle drive. Sound impossible? Think again. While you've heard stories of gunfights and saloons, there's a side of the Old West that history books conveniently forgot. Cannabis wasn't just tolerated in the frontier, it was everywhere. From medicine bottles to mining camps, from Pancho Villa's Revolutionary Army to railroad workers sharing a smoke under the stars. The real question isn't whether cannabis existed in the Wild West, it's how an entire culture built around it got erased from our memory. Before we dive into drug use in the Wild West, hit subscribe to never miss another tale from Gunslinger Gazette. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican War in 1848, but it started something else entirely. The newly unionized Texas held the biggest population of displaced Mexican people, becoming the hotspot for those looking to flee the growing imperial vice grip squeezing Mexico as a country. Mexican workers crossed into American territory carrying more than leather tools and cattle herding skills. They brought a completely different relationship with the same plant American doctors kept in glass bottles. Americans knew cannabis as medicine. You bought tinctures from pharmacists. You measured drops carefully. Mexicans knew it as something you rolled into thin cigarettes and passed around fires after long days of brutal work. Cannabis arrived across the border with a new name. Marijuana, the anglicized Spanish word for reefer. Two cultures suddenly occupied the same harsh landscape with opposite ways of using identical plants. The collision happened first in mining camps scattered across California and Nevada. Mexican workers taught American cowboys how to twist dried cannabis into paper cigarettes. They called them joints. White miners watched suspiciously at first, then they tried one after a 12-hour shift underground. Railroad construction crews adopted the practice faster than anyone expected. These men hammered spikes and hauled steel through desert heat and mountain cold for 14 hours straight. Cannabis helped them endure shifts that pushed human limits. The plant eased muscles torn from lifting rails. It quieted minds traumatized by daily explosions and cave-ins. More importantly, sharing joints around evening fires created communities among isolated crews scattered across thousands of miles of empty territory. The Mexican War redrew maps and shifted borders, but the real revolution happened around campfires where two cultures discovered they could share more than territory. Cannabis transformed from something you bought at pharmacies into something you shared with brothers. This cultural shift was about to find its most legendary champion in the desert revolution sweeping across Mexico. Francisco Pancho Villa rode across the desert with an army that newspapers called dangerous. They were right, but not for the reasons they thought. Villa's troops carried more than rifles and ammunition. They carried joints rolled from Mexican marijuana. While reporters focused on military tactics, Villa's soldiers were creating the most legendary cannabis culture North America had ever seen. His men believed marijuana gave them strength and courage. They smoked before charging machine gun nests. They passed joints while planning impossible raids against superior forces. Oral histories from surviving soldiers suggest that around half the army regularly used marijuana, sometimes even before battles. The plant became their spiritual armor against overwhelming odds. Federal soldiers feared these cannabis-smoking revolutionaries who seemed immune to fear and fatigue. The cultural shockwaves reached American border towns within months. Pancho's association with cannabis spread through El Paso and Tucson. His troops became folk heroes who represented freedom and defiance. American workers heard stories of revolutionaries who smoked marijuana and conquered armies twice their size. The plant suddenly symbolized rebellion against authority. It represented strength that came from outside conventional systems. Spanish words crossed linguistic borders during this cultural explosion. Cannabis became marijuana in American mouths. The term carried revolutionary energy and Mexican mystique. Anti-cannabis groups would later exploit this same Spanish origin, using the word marijuana to emphasize its Mexican connections and fuel anti-immigrant sentiment. Pancho died in 1923. His cannabis culture survived for generations. Southwestern mythology preserves stories of marijuana-smoking warriors who defeated impossible enemies. The plant had traveled an extraordinary journey through American culture. It started as hemp rope for frontier infrastructure. It evolved into medical tinctures that saved frontier lives. It transformed into social rituals that bonded isolated workers. Finally, it became a revolutionary symbol that challenged established power structures. This transformation revealed something deeper about the frontier itself. Frontier doctors would pull small brown bottles from their medical bags, labels reading "Extractum Cannabis." Outside their tents, miners writhed in agony from neuralgia that kept them awake for days. 20 drops in water brought peaceful sleep within an hour. These physicians carried death sentences in their bags every day. Cholera could kill entire settlements. Gunshot wounds festered without proper surgical tools. Broken bones meant permanent disability. They needed remedies that worked fast and worked reliably. Cannabis tinctures became their answer. The green liquid delivered results. Miners suffering from constant headaches found relief within minutes. Cattle barons crippled by gout could walk again after a few doses. Even rabies scares that sent entire towns into panic had treatment options. Doctors reached for cannabis because it eased suffering without the severe side effects they witnessed with other medicines. The U.S. Pharmacopoeia made their choice official starting in 1850. Cannabis earned its place alongside every other legitimate medicine in America for the next 92 years. Cannabis held the same medical status as morphine or quinine. Frontier pharmacies ordered cases of cannabis tinctures from suppliers in St. Louis and Chicago. Doctors prescribed them as routinely as modern physicians prescribe antibiotics. Hemp cultivation supported this medical demand. Kentucky and Missouri became key production centers. Farmers saw opportunity in those medical orders and planted accordingly. Their harvests supplied the pharmaceutical companies that processed plants into standardized tinctures. Frontier doctors never questioned their cannabis prescriptions. Neither did patients or families. The medicine worked when nothing else would. It eased suffering reliably. Frontier communities watched cannabis heal their sick and injured members year after year. The plant became as essential as bandages or surgical instruments. Cannabis tinctures kept the frontier alive. They turned potential deaths into recoveries. They transformed weeks of agony into days of healing. But medicine represented only one face of cannabis in the West. Cannabis didn't just exist in the Wild West. It helped define what the frontier became. The plant bridged cultures and created communities in ways that shaped American identity itself. Hemp rope built infrastructure. Medicine bottles saved lives. Campfire joints bonded isolated workers across racial lines. Revolutionary songs carried its legend beyond borders. The real Wild West was far more complex than Hollywood ever dared to show. Cannabis traveled from pharmacy shelves to shared rituals to symbols of rebellion. Next time someone mentions the drug-free Old West, remember the cowboys, laborers, and revolutionaries who knew better. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more content from Gunslinger Gazette.